Charlie, not exactly a big revelation from the president in that interview that Donald Trump will not honor the results of the election, of course, given what we saw in 2024, in 2020, and what he has signaled for this fall as well, but also that the Republican Party, some of those members who perhaps want to be his vice presidential nominee, falling in line. When asked by Kristen Welker on Meet the Press, for example, on Sunday, 6 different times, Senator Tim Scott would not commit to honoring the outcome of the election.
No, I mean, that's a very, very safe bet that Donald Trump is not going to graciously concede defeat because he never does. But it is interesting watching the auditioning for vice president. And, you know, the ghost of Mike Pence hangs over all of this, doesn't it? Because Donald Trump doesn't want just loyalty. He wants slavish loyalty. He wants a guarantee that in fact, the vice president, whoever he chooses, by the way, the one person he cannot fire, will in fact do his bidding. We'll do the tough things. We'll do the difficult, courageous things, like, for example, ignore the law. And it is interesting how willing all of these vice presidential wannabes are in basically saying, yes, Donald, we will say and do anything. We will use your words. We will kill puppies for you just to show how tough we are.
Yeah, in a gravel pit, no less. Caddy K, the Biden campaign was in the White House happy to lean into the split screen yesterday in terms of, hey, we're building this AI facility in the exact same place where Donald Trump failed to build that Foxconn plant. But this split screen that's also there that they're not talking about, but they're well aware of, and they certainly don't discourage reporters from noticing, is that Joe Biden yesterday in Wisconsin, he heads to the West Coast this week. Where's Donald Trump spending his time? In a courtroom in Manhattan. Do we think that is, we know how few undecideds there seem to be. Do you think that is going to be an image that is going to resonate with people, or is this trial going to come and go?
Yeah, I mean, even after a week of kind of steamy, stormy testimony, it's still difficult for all of us who are following the trial very closely to know in the long run how much impact this is going to have in November. Or is it because Donald Trump faces so many legal problems, they kind of get discounted and merged together? Or from Donald Trump's supporters' side point of view, they get portrayed as, you know, the deep state is against Donald Trump. I think it could split either way. And this is a bit of a messy trial. I mean, it's not just the subject matter that's messy. The legal case is not particularly clear. It would only take one member of the jury to say, actually, they don't buy the argument that it was tied to campaign finance or that Donald Trump was directly involved for this to be a hung jury. If it was a hung jury or if Donald Trump was acquitted, what impact would that have on the election? I mean, that's very different from a guilty finding for Donald Trump. So, and then the other question is, does the Biden campaign actually think that Donald Trump kind of muzzled to some extent in a courtroom is less beneficial to them than Donald Trump out on the campaign trail saying the kinds of things that they feel are explosive, that, you know, being pushed into those rallies which is when he goes off, you know, script and starts saying some of his more extreme things, and they actually feel that's more beneficial to them. Just on that Wisconsin thing, Jonathan, your outfit, Politico, had that great report yesterday, which may explain some of the reason why Joe Biden is not getting the kudos that he feels he should be getting, which is that it's only 17% of the money that was pledged that's actually been spent on these infrastructure projects. So it makes it a little harder for the president to go out there and say, look at all the benefits that we've brought for you.
So, Charlie, off of what Caddy just referenced, the trial and the verdict that would come from this trial, because you're more familiar with Republicans than I certainly am, what's your sense of what would happen to Trump's support if there were a guilty verdict? I mean, we've just seen Nikki Haley get 20% of the vote in the Indiana primary. If Donald Trump is found guilty, what's your sense? What would happen?
Well, it's not going to affect his hardcore support. I mean, the Republicans have already baked that in. I mean, they already raised their hands, you know, during the debate and said they would support Donald Trump even if he was a convicted felon. But being a convicted felon is not an asset. We do live on Earth 2.0, but it's hard to imagine that voters in my home state here of Wisconsin are going to be more likely to vote for somebody who is a convicted felon. And also, it's just the wash around of all of the sleaze surrounding him. It's not just the guilty verdict. It's just being reminded who Donald Trump is, the kind of world that he lives in, the way he treats women, the way he treats the idea of truth. So again, don't expect Republicans to break from him. Don't expect the base to move away from him. But swing voters are not likely to be impressed. And did I just comment, though, I'm just a few miles up the road from that Foxconn plant where Joe Biden was yesterday. Just trust me, people in Wisconsin remember this story really well. They remember the whole Foxconn con. They remember how it was touted by Donald Trump, how it was touted by Scott Walker. All of the money that was committed. These were really, really big numbers. This was a huge story here in Wisconsin. So this was one of the moments where, my reaction to Joe Biden coming in and trolling Trump on this was a pretty good act of presidential trolling to really highlight the gap between what Donald Trump promised and what happened. And trust me, people in Wisconsin remember this story and know exactly what Joe Biden is talking about.
A vivid contrast. There were supposed to be 13,000 jobs touted by Donald Trump that did not show up there.